Zara Fielding stepped out of her rusted Toyota into a cloud of pine-scented mountain air, her boots crunching on the gravel of the overgrown driveway. She stared up at the cabin she hadn't seen since she was 12, the one her late great-aunt left her in the will, and let out a long breath. The porch sagged like it had given up years ago, the roof was missing a few shingles, and ivy had claimed the far wall like it was winning a war. "This cannot be real," she muttered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She hadn't expected luxury, but she also hadn't expected this. Her great-aunt's beloved lakeside cabin looked like a haunted shack from a horror movie. Dragging her single suitcase up the creaking steps, Zara pushed open the door. The stale scent of dust and old wood hit her instantly. She coughed, flicking on the ancient light switch. Nothing, of course. "Perfect," she sighed. She set her bag down, took off her jacket, and rolled up her sleeves. She hadn't left her chaotic job in Chicago and walked out of a toxic relationship just to be defeated by rotting floorboards and a dead generator. This was her fresh start, even if it smelled like mildew and despair. Outside, a sleek black SUV pulled up next door. Zara glanced through the cracked window, eyebrows rising. The cabin next door wasn't a cabin at all, it was a sprawling, modern home with lakefront views and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered. Wearing a dark wool coat and sunglasses, even though the sun was behind clouds, he looked expensive. Zara ducked back from the window, rolling her eyes. Of course, the universe placed her next to a rich, probably arrogant guy while she tried to rebuild her life from a pile of splinters. A few hours later, after a failed attempt to fix the plumbing and a run-in with a spider the size of a small dog, Zara stood out on the porch, arms crossed, watching the man from earlier pull a massive suitcase from his SUV. He looked up and caught her staring. "Hi," he called, flashing a charming smile. Zara gave a cautious wave. "Hey." He walked over, the gravel crunching beneath his polished boots. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Rugged jawline, short dark hair, and a gaze that pinned her like he was used to getting answers. "I'm staying next door for a few weeks," he said. "Adam Donovan," Zara blinked. "Zara Fielding, I inherited the disaster behind me." He glanced at the cabin, then back at her. "It has character," she gave him a look. "You mean it's falling apart?" He laughed, and it was a warm sound. "All right, fair, but you're brave for taking it on. Brave or stupid, still deciding." He tilted his head. "Need a hand with anything?" Zara hesitated. She didn't like asking for help, but her back was already sore from moving furniture and she hadn't figured out how to get the water running. "Actually, if you happen to know anything about ancient plumbing." Adam held up a finger. "Let me grab my toolbox." She watched him walk away, eyebrows knitting. Who brings a toolbox to a lakeside mansion vacation? Within 20 minutes, he had the water running. "You're a lifesaver," she said, wiping her hands with a towel as they stood in the tiny, dim kitchen. "I know my way around old pipes," he said. "My grandfather was a contractor." She leaned against the counter, studying him. "So you're not just a guy who wears expensive coats and rents houses that cost more than my entire life," Adam chuckled. "Guilty on both counts, but I like getting my hands dirty once in a while." "Well, thanks, seriously." He glanced around the cabin. "You here alone, for now?" "I was overdue for a reset, left Chicago to figure things out. This place is not exactly what I expected." He nodded. "I get that. Sometimes the best things start with a mess." They stood in silence for a second too long. Zara cleared her throat. "I should get back to cleaning." "This place needs all the help it can get." Adam gave a small smile. "If you ever need another hand, you know where to find me." As he walked out, Zara stared after him. There was something about him confident, kind, but guarded, and he didn't seem to mind the dust and broken cabinets. The next morning, she was on the porch sanding down a railing when his voice surprised her. "Coffee." She looked up to see Adam holding out a to-go cup. "I figured you'd need it more than I do." "You just bribed your way into my good graces," Zara said, taking the cup. He leaned against the railing beside her, sipping his own. "So what's the plan with this place? Survive at first, then maybe turn it into a cozy rental or a bookstore cafe. I don't know, I just needed a break." He looked at her like he understood. "What about you?" she asked. What are you doing here? Taking time off work. Needed space to think, somewhere quiet. Zara raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, high-powered job in the city. Something like that. She didn't press him. He didn't offer more. They fell into a rhythm over the next few days. He'd stop by with coffee, help her with repairs, never overbearing, always respectful. Zara found herself looking forward to his knock on the door more than she wanted to admit. One evening, she was repainting the living room wall when Adam walked in holding a brown paper bag. Dinner, he said. You've been living off granola bars and stubbornness, she laughed. You're not wrong. He unpacked takeout from a fancy restaurant in town, stuff she never would have splurged on. They ate on the floor, using a paint can as a table, and talked until the sun dipped below the lake. I haven't laughed this much in months, she said, leaning her head back against the wall. Adam's eyes lingered on her. Me neither. Their eyes met. Neither of them moved. The air between them shifted, but Zara looked away first. I should finish this wall before I lose the light, she said, voice quiet. Adam nodded slowly. Right, I'll let you get back to it. He stood, hesitating before he left. Night, Zara. Night, Adam. She waited for the door to close before exhaling. Her heart was beating too fast. This wasn't supposed to happen, but something was something real. And she wasn't ready for it, not yet. Zara balanced a wooden crate on one hip as she pushed the cabin's screen door open with her shoulder. The spring air had finally shifted, warm enough to leave the windows open, and the scent of pine and lake water drifted through the space as she set the crate down beside the fireplace. She'd found it buried beneath a tarp in the storage, shed her great-aunt's records, old books, and a few faded photo albums. It felt like unearthing someone else's memories, and yet oddly grounding. A soft knock tapped against the doorframe. You busy? Adam's voice floated in. Zara looked up from the crate, brushing hair from her forehead. If I say yes, will it stop you? He leaned against the frame, one hand tucked in his coat pocket, the other holding a long, rectangular package wrapped in brown paper. Probably not. What's that? He stepped inside and set the package gently on the table. Something I found in town, thought it might belong here. Zara raised an eyebrow and peeled back the paper. Inside was a framed print, an old map of the lake, hand-drawn, with cabins marked by tiny inked X's. Her cabin was there, labeled in faint cursive as Mara's Nest. Her throat tightened. That was her name, she said. Mara, I figured, Adam said softly. The shop owner told me she used to help maintain the trails around the lake. Said she was kind of a local legend. Zara traced a finger along the paper. She never talked about this place much. I think she wanted to keep it sacred. Adam met her eyes. Maybe she left it to you for that same reason. Zara nodded once, then looked away. I've been thinking about staying longer than I planned. His posture shifted slightly, like he'd been holding his breath. Yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to the city, or to the version of myself I was there. That version still exists, he said. But maybe it's not the one you want anymore. Zara tilted her head. You talk like someone who's had to walk away from something big. Adam didn't answer right away. He moved to the table, resting his fingertips on the edge of the map. I used to run a firm, tech consulting. Built it from scratch with a friend. We sold it last year. How much? A lot. She narrowed her eyes. Define a lot. He gave a short laugh, but his expression didn't match the sound. Enough that I could buy 100 cabins like this one and still not notice. Zara blinked. So you're not just well off. You're one of those people who could lose $1 million and call it a bad Tuesday. Something like that. She considered him for a long moment. You don't act like it. That's the point, he said, his voice low. I didn't like who I became when money stopped mattering. Zara sat down at the table, fingers still on the map. Why are you here, Adam? Really? I needed to remember what it feels like to be still. To not be needed for anything but my own thoughts. And now, he looked at her, his gaze steady. Now I'm not so sure I want to leave. Zara stood quietly, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. You don't even know me. I'm beginning to, he said. And I'm not in a hurry. That night, she couldn't sleep. The map hung above the fireplace now, and every time she glanced at it, she felt Mara's presence more strongly than she ever had in life. She stood barefoot on the porch, arms crossed against the night chill when headlights appeared down the road. A silver car stopped at the gate of Adam's house. A woman stepped out tall, impeccably dressed, heels clicking against the gravel. She didn't knock. She used a key. Zara's stomach twisted. She turned back inside without watching the door open. The next morning, she didn't wait for coffee. She was already dressed, sanding the old kitchen cabinets with more force than necessary when Adam appeared in the doorway. He wore a gray sweater and jeans, the kind of casual that still looked deliberate. "Hey," he said carefully, as if testing the temperature of the air. "You have company," Zara replied without looking up. She left. Zara set the sander down and faced him, her arms crossed. "You didn't mention anyone else was coming." "I didn't know she was. Her name's Eliza. We were engaged once." Zara's eyebrows lifted. "Wow, that's a casual bomb to drop." "I didn't think it mattered," Adam said, stepping inside. "We haven't spoken in over a year. She came to talk me into joining a new venture she's launching." "And?" I said no. Zara leaned against the counter, expression unreadable. "That's not the kind of thing people just drop by to ask over cocktails." "She thought she still had a hold on me," he said. "She doesn't." Zara held his gaze. "I'm not interested in being someone's post-Eliza Clarity." "You're not," Adam said. "You're the reason I didn't even entertain the idea." She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing but not disappearing. "I don't want to be pulled into someone else's mess." "I'm not asking you to be," he said. "I'm trying to build something new, something honest." They stood in the silence that followed, the kind that carried weight. Zara turned back to the cabinets. "I still have a lot of sanding to do." Adam stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Then let me help." Later that afternoon, they drove into town together. The hardware store was nearly empty, and she caught herself watching the way Adam spoke to the elderly clerk, patient, kind, never condescending. Afterward, they walked past a small bookstore tucked between two cafes. Zara paused in front of the window, her eyes drawn to the faded wood shelves and the reading nook in the corner. "This used to be my dream," she said. "A small place like this. Somewhere quiet where people come in dripping rain asking for stories and leave with their arms full of paperbacks." Adam looked at the store, then at her. "So do it," she laughed. "It's not that simple. Why not?" "I don't even know where to start." He stepped in front of her. "You start by believing it's possible." She looked up at him, unsure what startled her more, the intensity of his gaze or the way her heart responded to it. Back at the cabin that evening, she unpacked a box of Mara's books. Tucked between 2 volumes of poetry was an envelope addressed to her in looping cursive. She opened it slowly. "Zara, if you're reading this, then you stayed. That alone makes me proud. This place was never meant to be perfect, but it was always meant to be yours. Trust yourself. Let yourself fall in love with what you build here. Always." Zara folded the letter and held it to her chest, her throat tight. She didn't hear Adam come in. His voice was soft. "Everything okay?" She looked over her shoulder, eyes shining. "Yeah. Yeah, it is." Something between them shifted again, not louder, but deeper. And this time she didn't look away. Rain drizzled down the cabin's tin roof in a soft, steady rhythm as Zara leaned over the workbench she'd set up in the corner of the living room. A half-finished wooden sign lay in front of her, the words "Mara's Nest" slowly coming to life under her careful brush strokes. The map Adam had given her now hung above the fireplace, a quiet monument to something she was still learning how to claim. She dipped the paintbrush again, but her hand stilled before it touched the wood. The air felt different, not colder, exactly, just heavier, the kind of weight that crept into your chest when something was about to change. A knock came. "Doors open," she called, her voice quieter than she intended. Adam stepped inside, hair damp from the rain, an umbrella in one hand and a large, flat folder tucked under the other arm. His coat was unbuttoned, revealing a navy sweater and dark jeans that clung slightly from the weather. He set the umbrella by the door and held up the folder. "I have something," he said. "Might be crazy." Zara eyed it warily. "Is it going to make me want to run back to the city?" He shook his head, approaching slowly. "Just look." She pulled off her gloves and took the folder from him. Inside were architectural sketches, detailed, professional, and clearly expensive. The main page showed a redesigned version of the cabin, wider windows, a wraparound porch, solar panels hidden in the roofline. The structure still had its charm, but it looked sturdier, more welcoming. "Did you draw these?" she asked. "I had them commissioned. From someone I trust." Zara blinked. "You did this without asking?" "I wanted to show you what was possible. You don't have to use them. I just saw what you were building here and thought. Maybe it could be more." She set the folder on the table, her fingers resting on the edge. "This place means something to me. I don't want it to become something I can't recognize." "I know," he said gently. "That's why I kept the bones. It'd still be Mara's nest. Just with better plumbing and walls that don't sigh when the wind hits." Zara laughed, more out of surprise than amusement. "You think you can just waltz in here with blueprints and fix everything?" "No," he said. "I think I can offer you a way to dream bigger. But only if you want to." She met his eyes, the air between them charged. "Why are you doing this, Adam?" "Because I believe in what you're building, and because I care what happens to you." Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not ready," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking you to be," he replied. "I'm just saying I'll be here when you are." The rain thickened outside, blurring the windows with silver. Zara looked back down at the sketches, her thoughts racing faster than she could catch them. "I want to start small," she said. "Keep the porch. Add better insulation, maybe a reading nook where the pantry used to be." Adam smiled, not wide, not smug, but quiet and steady. "Then we start small." Later that week, the town's spring fair returned for the first time in 3 years. Zara hadn't planned to go. She wasn't ready for small talk or polite questions about her sudden relocation, but when she opened her cabin door that afternoon, Adam was already on the porch, holding 2 cups of cider and a folded flannel blanket. "The lake's clearing up," he said. "You can see the hills from the pier." Zara hesitated. "Is this your way of tricking me into socializing?" "No," he said. "It's my way of tricking you into fresh air and possibly funnel cake." The fairgrounds were small, nestled between the lake and a stretch of forest. Handmade signs pointed toward booths selling honey, knit scarves, and jars of pickled vegetables. Children ran past holding balloons, and the scent of cinnamon sugar hung thick in the air. Zara walked beside Adam, watching the way people greeted him, friendly, familiar, but cautious. She realized then they didn't know who he really was. Not here, not yet. They stopped by a booth selling antique books, and Zara's fingers skimmed the worn spines. She pulled out a copy of a poetry collection, flipping it open to a page marked with a pressed flower. Adam leaned over to glance at the text. "The ache of silence is sometimes louder than a scream." Zara closed the book slowly. "I used to write things like this, before I got caught up in everything else." "Then you should start again," he said. "You have stories worth telling." They stayed until the sun dipped low and the lakeshore lit up with paper lanterns. Music drifted from a small stage, a string quartet playing something soft and aching. Adam led her toward the edge of the dock, where the water reflected the orange glow of the sky. "I've been thinking," he said, voice low, "about staying longer than I planned." Zara looked up at him. "Why?" "Because leaving doesn't feel like the right direction anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The moment stretched, long and uncertain. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of needing this, of needing you." He touched her hand, his fingers barely brushing hers. "I'm afraid too, but I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you." The music shifted, slower now. A few couples danced near the bonfire. Zara turned toward him, the lake breeze tugging at her hair. "Dance with me." He hesitated, just long enough for her to wonder if she'd overstepped. But then he stepped closer, his hand settling at her waist as they moved gently to the music. Neither of them spoke. There was no need to. When the song ended, she didn't let go. Back at the cabin, moonlight spilled across the porch. Zara unlocked the door, then turned to face him. "Come in," she said. Adam didn't ask questions. He followed her inside. They sat in the living room, the only light coming from the fireplace. A quiet tension hung between them, thicker than silence, warmer than hesitation. "I don't know what this is yet," Zara said, "but I want to find out." Adam reached for her hand, his touch steady. "So do I." The fire cracked softly. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and pine and something new. Neither of them moved to break the moment. because for the first time, neither wanted to. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the nearly finished cabin, pooling across the newly polished floorboards that gleamed with a golden warmth. The scent of cedar and fresh paint lingered in the air, a quiet reminder of how far the place had come. Where once rotting beams and broken floor tiles had ruled, now stood a space filled with quiet elegance, still humble, still hers, but transformed by care and intention. Zara stood barefoot in the open kitchen, her fingers trailing along the edge of the butcher block countertop. The old pantry had been replaced with a built-in nook where a cushioned bench sat beneath a bay window. A small stack of books leaned against a ceramic mug that held dried lavender. She hadn't planned on feeling at home so soon, but here she was, heart tangled in something she hadn't expected. Adam's voice floated in from the porch. "I found something in the shed." Zara stepped outside, brushing dust from her jeans. "If it's another broken chair, I'm burning it." He held up a small wooden box, its edges worn and its lid nearly falling off. "No chairs. Just this." She took it from him, lifting the lid slowly. Inside were faded recipe cards, folded letters, and a black and white photo of two women standing on the dock with their arms around each other. One of them was unmistakably Mara, younger, in a wide-brimmed straw hat. The other was a woman Zara didn't recognize. "There's a name on the back," Adam said as she turned the photo over. "For Mara, the one who taught me how to stay still. Love, Helen." Zara's fingers tightened around the edge of the photo. "I didn't know Mara had someone. Maybe she couldn't share it back then, or maybe she chose not to." Zara set the photo gently back inside the box. "She told me once that love wasn't always loud." Adam rested his shoulder against the porch post. "It doesn't have to be." They watched a pair of loons cut across the lake's surface, their wings skimming the water. The quiet between them didn't press or demand, it simply existed. "I've been offered a job," Adam said after a while. Zara turned her head. "In the city? No, here. A local startup wants to expand their platform. They found out I was in town and asked if I'd consult." She studied his face. "Do you want to?" "I think I do. It wouldn't be high profile, just a few days a week. Something steady, something grounded. Sounds like the opposite of what you used to chase." He looked at her, expression steady. "That's the point. I want to build something different now." Her heart lifted in a way she hadn't allowed it to before. "So you're staying, if you'll let me." She let out a soft breath. "I don't want to do this alone anymore." "You're not." By mid-afternoon, the town square was bustling with the local artisan market. Zara walked beside Adam, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. She wore a linen dress she'd found in a consignment shop 2 towns over, the hem brushing her calves as the breeze picked up. She stopped at a booth selling hand-stitched journals and ran her fingers across the embossed covers. "You thinking of writing again?" Adam asked. "I already started." "Just a few pages, about this place, about her, about you." He slid his hand into hers. "Can I read it someday? Maybe, if you keep showing up." He grinned, not with arrogance, but with something softer. "I plan to." They passed a vendor selling handmade signs, and one caught Zara's eye. It was carved from driftwood, the lettering clean and simple. "You are exactly where you're meant to be." She picked it up. "This is going above the fireplace." Back at the cabin, they hung the sign together. The fire crackled low in the hearth, and the early evening sun cast long shadows across the floor. Zara stood back, arms folded, studying the space. "I think Mara would have liked this. I think she'd be proud of what you made of it." Zara turned to face him. "She gave me the place." "You gave me the courage." Adam stepped closer. "You had it all along, I just helped you see it." A knock sounded at the door before she could respond. She opened it to find a woman in her 60s holding a manila folder and a small canvas-wrapped package. "You must be Zara," the woman said. "I'm Celeste. I used to be Mara's neighbor before she moved out here full-time." Zara stepped aside. "Come in." Celeste handed her the folder. "She left this with me years ago. Told me to deliver it if you ever stayed longer than a season." Inside were deed papers, a letter, and a small envelope marked final. Zara opened it with careful fingers. "Zara, if you're reading this, I know you did more than just visit. I know you saw what this place could be, and I trust you made it your own. I'm leaving the land behind the cabin to you, as well the old trail, the orchard, and the dock. Do with it what you will. Just promise me one thing. When you find someone who makes you feel like this place does safe, honest, and whole, don't let them go. Love always. Zara blinked away tears before they could fall. She looked up at Adam, who had gone quiet, reading her expression. There's more land, she said. And more to do. He reached for her hand. Then let's do it together. The next weeks passed in a quiet rhythm of progress. Zara installed shelves in the reading nook. Adam helped her plant herbs along the back steps. They painted furniture in the mornings and watched the sun set from the edge of the dock at night. The cabin no longer felt like a relic. It felt like a beginning. One morning, she woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of birdsong. Adam stood at the stove scrambling eggs, his hair tousled and his sleeves pushed up. He looked like he belonged there, like he'd always belonged there. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. I never asked what brought you to this lake in the first place. He set down the spoon. I read an article about the area, some piece on off-grid retreats and healing spaces. Thought I'd come for a week, ended up finding something I didn't know I needed. Zara rested her chin against his shoulder. What's that? You. The words hung between them, unguarded and unshaken. She turned him to face her. I've never loved anyone the way I love you. His eyes softened. Then we're even. Later that day, they stood under the archway of what used to be the orchard. Friends from the town gathered in folding chairs, and a local folk trio played soft music as Zara walked barefoot across the grass, her dress trailing behind her like a whisper. Adam waited beneath the arch, his hands steady, his smile wide. They exchanged vows in front of the lake, with the sun dipping low and lanterns swaying in the breeze. There was no flash, no spectacle, just the two of them, promising forever in the place where it all began. Afterward, they lit a fire on the beach, passing mugs of cider as laughter echoed across the water. The stars blinked awake one by one, and Zara leaned into Adam's side, her head resting against his chest. You know, she said, I never planned any of this. He kissed her temple. Some things are better unplanned. She tilted her face toward his. Whatever happens next, I want it here, with me, always. They watched the flames rise and fall, the lake calm and endless before them. And between them, nothing but the certainty that love, like this place, was something worth staying for. The cabin's roof shimmered under the morning sun as birds flitted between the newly bloomed apple blossoms beyond the orchard. Zara stood at the edge of the dock, barefoot and wrapped in Adam's oversized sweater, watching the lake's surface ripple with the soft breeze. She held a steaming mug of chamomile in her hands, the quiet hum of spring wrapping around her like a promise. Behind her, the cabin had settled into something permanent. The renovations were done, the furniture finished, and the shelves lined with books and hand-picked treasures from the local community. It no longer looked like a stranger's legacy, it looked like a life. Adam stepped onto the dock beside her, holding a folder in one hand. He kissed the top of her head before offering it to her. What's this? She asked, setting her mug on the railing. Something I've been working on, he said. It's a proposal, not the kind with rings. The other kind? She opened the folder slowly, flipping through the pages. A detailed plan for a small business incubator right here in the valley. Focused on helping local artisans grow their online presence with resources for marketing, logistics, and branding. It was rooted in the area's values, and it was clear Adam had poured real thought into every word. You're serious about this, she said, looking up at him. I want to invest in this place, Zara, not just financially. I want to be part of what it becomes. She traced a hand over the page. So this is the new venture, he nodded. One I can build without losing myself or you. She stepped forward and looped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his chest. Then let's build it together. They spent the following months turning the back half of the property, once a tangle of overgrown shrubs and forgotten stones, into a shared workspace. Adam designed the layout while Zara coordinated with local builders, choosing reclaimed wood and wide windows that looked out toward the lake. They named it the Nest, a tribute not just to Mara, but to the idea of building something soft and strong from the ground up. The space opened in early autumn, just as the trees began to burn gold and rust along the hills. On the first day, a dozen people came. A couple who made organic soap, a retired carpenter who carved canoes, a teenager with a photography dream. Zara watched them settle into the space and felt something in her chest shift, a quiet, certain click. That evening, she and Adam stood in the empty hall after everyone had gone, the lanterns still glowing overhead. "You made this happen," she said. "We did," he corrected, taking her hand. She looked around. "It feels like the beginning of something." "It is, but it's also the continuation of everything that brought us here." In late October, they drove into the city for a rare visit. Zara had been invited to speak on a local radio show about community revitalization. Adam stayed quiet in the waiting room, reading a paperback while she spoke on air about second chances, about rebuilding with roots instead of blueprints. When she came out, beaming and flushed, he stood and offered her his hand like they were at a ballroom instead of a radio station. "You were brilliant," he said, "and now I want to show you something." They drove through the city until they reached a quiet street on the West End. Adam parked, then opened her door. She looked around. "Why are we here?" He led her to a storefront. The windows were covered in brown paper, but she could make out shelves inside. A small sign on the door read, "Coming soon, Fielding Books." She turned toward him, eyes wide. "I bought it last month," he said. "It's yours for whenever you're ready." Zara stared at the door. "You. How did you?" "I remembered what you said, about a bookstore, people walking in from the rain looking for stories. I found this and thought maybe you could have both lives. This one here and the one we've built by the lake." She threw her arms around him, her voice muffled against his chest. "You're impossible." "I know," he whispered, kissing her hair, "but I'm yours." That winter, the bookstore opened quietly. Zara split her time between the city and the lake, never staying away from either too long. When she was in town, Adam came with her. When she was up north, he worked from the cabin, often leaving her notes tucked into her books or pressed between the pages of her journals. On a snow-heavy morning in December, she found him on one knee in the orchard, where the trees stood bare but dignified in the frost. He held out a ring, a simple band with a lake blue sapphire set in the center. "I don't want a different life," he said. "I just want this one with you, every season, every storm, every morning." She nodded before she even realized she was crying. Yes. They married beneath the same archway, this time with the trees dusted in snow and lanterns hanging from bare branches. The vows were quiet, personal, whispered against cold cheeks and warm hands. The cabin remained their anchor. The nest continued to grow, including a calendar of community events and workshops. Zara held her first writer's retreat there that spring, and Adam taught a course on ethical entrepreneurship that sold out within hours. 1 year later, Zara stood on the porch cradling a newborn girl in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled around hers, and the world felt impossibly full. Adam stepped up beside her, his face softer than she'd ever seen it. "What does she think of the view?" "She's still deciding," Zara whispered. "But I think she's going to love it here." He wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her temple. Just like her mother. They watched the lake together as the sun dipped low, the water flickering with light. The wind rustled the trees, and in the distance, laughter echoed from the path leading to the nest. Zara leaned into Adam's side, her daughter resting against her heart. They had built something lasting, not just a home, but a life rooted in truth, shaped by risk, and kept alive by love. And for the first time, there was nothing left to prove, only everything left to enjoy together. Forever.